The blood-red sunrise painted General Doraf's scarred face as he surveyed the battlefield through enhanced optics. 3 parallel scars, souvenirs from the Battle of Purdue where he'd led the charge personally, stretched across his leathery gray skin, pulling tight as he grimaced at the tactical situation. The human settlement of New Harmony lay partially in ruins below, smoke rising from a dozen impact sites where Kagor artillery had found its mark during the night's bombardment. "Situation report," he ordered, his translator rendering his guttural clicks into standard galactic. Commander Rel approached, ducking instinctively as human counter-battery fire whistled overhead. She was young for her rank, but had proven herself a capable officer in the 3 years since the war began. "Our forces have secured Sectors 2 and 3, she reported. "The humans are falling back to prepared positions in Sectors 4 through 7. Battle Group Zenith is encountering heavy resistance in Sector 6. Doraf nodded grimly. The humans always fought harder than anyone expected. It was why, despite the Kogor's technological advantages, this war had dragged on for 3 bloody years. "The ancestral claim must be honored," he muttered, more to himself than to Rel. "This world was Kogor before it was human. A millennium ago his people had established outposts on this verdant world, only to abandon them during the Great Plague. When they returned centuries later, they found humans had settled the planet, building cities and farms across lands that Kogor historical records clearly documented as their own. The diplomatic missions had failed. The ultimatums had been ignored. Now only war remained." "Sir," Rel interrupted his thoughts. "Battle Group Zenith is pinned down in Sector 6. Commander Hax reports 40% casualties and requests immediate artillery support." Doraf studied his tactical display. Sector 6 was a residential district on the outskirts of the human settlement. His forces had been attempting to secure it for 3 days now, with little progress. "Confirm target coordinates," he ordered. Rel relayed the request to the artillery officers positioned behind the ridge. "Confirmed, sir. The humans have a hardened position at coordinates 47.3 by 22.9. Heavy weapon emplacement with at least 30 enemy combatants." Doraf zoomed in on the location. A 3-story structure with reinforced walls, likely a command post or munitions cache. His troops were taking heavy fire from that position. "Authorization granted," he said after a moment's consideration. "Fire mission, 3 rounds, precision guided." "Firing," came the response from the artillery battery. Doraf watched as 3 brilliant streaks arced through the sky toward the target. But something was wrong. The terminal guidance on the second shell wavered, its trajectory shifting. "Abort!" he shouted into his comm unit, but it was too late. 2 shells struck the hardened position as intended. The third impacted 100 meters away into a low, sprawling building with a large red cross painted on its roof, the universal symbol for a medical facility. The explosion rocked the valley, debris flying skyward as the structure collapsed in a cloud of dust and fire. "What was that building?" Doraf demanded, dread clawing at his insides. Rel's face had gone ashen, her cranial ridges flattening in distress. "Sir, it appears to be a dual-purpose structure. According to our intelligence, it's both an educational facility and a field hospital." Doraf's hearts seemed to stop. "Civilian?" "Yes, sir. According to human settlement patterns, it's—" "A school," Doraf finished, his voice hollow. He had studied human culture extensively during officer training. He knew what their schools contained. "And a hospital, with the universal protection symbol clearly visible. Children, wounded, medics, all protected categories under the laws of civilized warfare." A primal sound escaped his throat, somewhere between a roar and a scream. He'd bombed children, the greatest taboo in Kogor warfare, in any civilized warfare. And worse, he'd done it to humans. The stories of human retribution flashed through his mind, required reading at the Kogor War College. The Red Reef campaign loomed largest in these accounts. When mercenaries had deliberately targeted human schools, the response had been apocalyptic. Entire planets glassed, a species hunted to extinction, no quarter given, no surrender accepted. "Pull back," he ordered, his voice trembling. "Tactical retreat to secondary positions." "Sir?" Rel asked, confused. "But we're making progress in sectors." "Now!" Dorff bellowed. "Regroup at coordinates Echo 7. As his forces executed the withdrawal, Dorff's mind raced. The humans would show no mercy now. They would hunt his people across the stars. No explanation would satisfy them. No apology would be accepted. Unless— "Commander Rel," he said as they reached the fallback position, his voice low and strained. "Assemble the senior staff immediately." 30 minutes later, Dorff stood before his assembled command staff in the mobile headquarters. 12 senior officers, the best and brightest the Kogor Expeditionary Force had to offer, looked back at him with expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. "The situation has changed," Dorff began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Our artillery strike in Sector 6 has complicated matters, sir," Colonel Thraz, his chief of operations, inquired. "One of our shells struck a human medical facility that was also serving as an educational center," Dorff said, forcing the words out. "There were civilian casualties." A ripple of dismay passed through the assembled officers. Every one of them knew what that meant. "Children?" Commander Rel asked, though she already knew the answer. Dorff nodded grimly. "The humans will respond with extreme prejudice. You all know the history." "But this was an accident," Thraz protested. "A targeting malfunction." "Do you think that will matter to them?" Dorff snarled. "They will not listen to explanations. They will not accept apologies. They will hunt us down and exterminate us to the last Kogor." Silence fell over the command tent. "Unless," Dorff continued after a moment, "they never discover who was responsible." His officers exchanged glances. "What are you suggesting, General?" Rel asked cautiously. "We cannot win this war if the humans unite against us with the fury of vengeance," Dorff said. "But we also cannot simply surrender and hope for mercy, not after what happened today. There is only one path forward." He pointed to the tactical display. "We deny everything. We destroy all evidence of our involvement. And we press the attack with everything we have." "Sir," Thraz looked shocked. "The shell that hit the medical facility was not ours," Dorff said, his voice hardening. "It was a human artillery round that misfired, or perhaps an ammunition cache inside the building that exploded. Either way, the tragedy was of human making, not Kogor." "But the targeting data," Rel began. "Will be purged from all systems," Dorff interrupted. "Effective immediately. And any officer who speaks of this matter again will be executed for treason against the Kogor people." The officers stared at him in stunned silence. This was not the Honorable General Dorff they had followed into battle. This was something else, something desperate and dangerous. "Sir," Thraz said cautiously, "this violates every tenet of the laws of civilized warfare. The ancestral code demands we take responsibility for—" "The ancestral code will not matter if our entire species is hunted to extinction," Dorff roared. "We press the attack at dawn, full commitment." One by one, his officers saluted, though some with visible reluctance. As they filed out, only Rel remained behind. "Sir," she said softly when they were alone, "this path, it has no honor." Dorff stared at the tactical display, at the blinking icon marking the destroyed school. "Honor is a luxury for those who are not facing extinction, Commander," he replied. "I bear the responsibility for what happened today, but I will not condemn our entire species to death for one tragic error." Rel studied him for a long moment, then nodded sharply and left without another word. Major Eli Jack Frost stood amid the rubble of what had once been Sector 6 Elementary School, and Emergency Medical Center, his face carved from stone. The air still reeked of burning and death. "Casualty report," he demanded of the medical officer beside him, his voice devoid of emotion despite the horror surrounding them. 23 children, the medic replied, her voice hollow. 16 wounded patients, 7 medical staff. Frost knelt beside a small covered form. A child's stuffed toy lay nearby, covered in dust and blood. For a brief moment something flickered across his otherwise impassive features, a flash of raw fury quickly brought under control. His men had seen this before. It was why they called him Jack Frost behind his back, not just for his name, but for the cold, calculating precision that overtook him when confronted with atrocities. The colder he appeared, the more merciless his response would be. "Sir," his tactical officer approached, tablet in hand, "we've analyzed the footage of the attack." "And?" Frost asked, his voice tight with controlled rage. 3 artillery shells, sir. Kogor plasma artillery, based on the signature. 2 hit our forward position, but the 3rd veered off course. We have clear footage showing it." "An accident, then?" "It appears so. And there's more. We intercepted a partial transmission from the Kogor lines right after impact, someone shouting, 'Abort,' in their language." Frost nodded slowly, processing this information, his blue eyes as cold as glaciers. "They initially pulled back," the tactical officer continued, "full withdrawal to the ridge lines. But now they're massing for a major offensive. Every indication suggests they're preparing for an all-out assault at dawn." Frost stood, brushing the dust from his uniform with methodical precision. "Patch me through to command, sir." "The Kogor had their chance," Frost said, his voice dropping several degrees. "They could have owned their mistake. Instead, they're doubling down, betting we're too weak to respond." His eyes moved across the rows of small covered bodies. Time to show them exactly how wrong they are. Dawn broke over the battlefield, painting the sky in shades of crimson. Doraf stood on the ridge, surveying the human positions through his tactical visor. His troops were in position, ready for the all-out assault he had ordered. "All units report ready, General," Commander Rell said from beside him, her voice flat, devoid of its usual confidence. "Good," Doraf replied. "The assault begins in 5 minutes. Total commitment, no reserves held back." "Yes, sir," Rell said, then hesitated. "Sir, the humans have been quiet all night, no counter-battery fire, no reinforcement of their positions. It's unusual." "They're in shock," Doraf said dismissively. "We caught them off guard. That's why we must press the advantage now, before they recover." Rell saluted stiffly and moved away to relay his orders. Doraf scanned the battlefield one last time. The human positions were indeed quiet, almost too quiet. But there was no turning back now. His deception, his attempt to cover up the tragedy, had committed him to this course. "All units, commence attack," he ordered over the command frequency. Kogor assault craft rose from their concealed positions, heavy weapons charging. Artillery behind the lines began to fire, plasma shells arcing toward the human defenses. Ground forces moved forward in practiced formation, weapons at the ready. And then the world exploded. The ground beneath the advancing Kogor forces erupted in a series of carefully timed detonations, throwing tanks and troops into the air. Hidden weapon emplacements emerged from camouflaged bunkers, pouring devastating fire into the Kogor ranks. "Ambush!" Rell shouted through the chaos. "The humans knew we were coming!" Dorfel stared in shock as his carefully planned assault disintegrated into chaos. How could they have known? How could they have prepared so thoroughly in a single night? "Pull back to defensive positions," he ordered. But it was too late. Human dropships appeared from behind the mountains, engines screaming as they deployed directly into the Kogor rear areas. Not the usual human transports, but something new, sleeker, faster, more heavily armed. "Sir, we're getting reports of human commandos behind our lines," his communications officer reported, voice strained. "They're targeting command posts, artillery batteries, sensor arrays." The command post rocked. as an explosion detonated nearby. Screens flickered, went dark. "Status report," Dorath demanded. "Battle Group Zenith is destroyed," Rel reported grimly. "Eastern flank collapsing. Western flank cut off and surrounded." Doraf whispered, more to himself than anyone else. How did they mobilize so quickly? The answer came from an unexpected source. The main communications display flared to life, showing the face of a human officer. Not just any officer, the base commander of New Harmony. "General Doraf," the human said in flawless Kagor, his face a mask of controlled fury. "This is Major Eli Frost. Perhaps you remember me. I was in charge of the sector you bombed yesterday." Doraf stared at the display, hearts racing. "How did you breach our communications?" "The same way we knew exactly where your forces would attack," Frost replied coldly. "We've been in your systems for weeks, watching, waiting. We heard you, General. We heard you order your officers to cover up what happened, to deny responsibility for killing children." Doraf felt the blood drain from his face. "We were prepared to accept it was an accident," Frost continued. "We intercepted your abort command. We saw the guidance malfunction. But then we heard what came after, your lies. Your plans to attack again." The human's eyes were like ice. "You should know, General, that there's a difference between humans and Kogor. When you harm our children, we don't just seek vengeance. We deliver justice." The display went dark. "Sir," Rel said urgently, "enemy forces have breached the perimeter. They'll reach the command post in minutes." Doraf looked around at his staff, at the fear in their eyes. He had led them here. He had made this choice. "Evacuate," he ordered. "All of you. Surrender to the humans if you can. Tell them you were following orders." "Sir?" Rel looked confused. "That's an order, Commander," Doraf said firmly. "I'll buy you time." One by one, his officers saluted and filed out through the rear exit. Only Rel lingered. "It was an accident," she said quietly. "The school." "Yes," Doraf agreed. "But what came after? That was a choice. The wrong choice." Rel nodded, understanding in her eyes. "May the ancestors receive you with honor, General." "I doubt they will," Doraf replied grimly. "Now go." Alone in the command post, Doraf checked his weapons. He would not die hiding. He would face his enemies standing, as a warrior should. The sounds of combat grew closer. Plasma fire, the distinctive crack of human kinetic weapons, the screams of the wounded. And then, silence. The door to the command post blew inward in a shower of debris. Through the dust and smoke, a single figure emerged. A human in combat armor, face obscured by a tactical helmet. "Major Frost, I presume?" Dorath said, lowering his weapon to the ground in a gesture of surrender. The human removed his helmet, revealing a face etched with grief and rage, but eyes of such cold, calculating intensity that Dorath felt a chill run through his body. Now he understood why the human troops called their commander Jack Frost. It wasn't just his name, it was the glacial precision with which he executed judgment. "General Doraf," Frost acknowledged, his breath visible in the suddenly cold air of the command post. "You've won, Major," Doraf said. "My forces are scattered. I offer my unconditional surrender." "I'm afraid it's too late for that," Frost replied, his voice as frigid as a polar night. "You had your chance yesterday when it was still an accident. Now it's a war crime." "I made a mistake," Doraf admitted. "After the school, I panicked. I thought your species would show no mercy, would hunt mine to extinction for what happened." "And so you chose to attack again? To risk more civilian casualties?" Frost's words cut like shards of ice. "Tell me, General, how many more children would have died in today's assault?" Doraf had no answer. "You were right about one thing," Frost continued, methodically removing his tactical gloves. "Violence can be merciless. But there's a difference between justice and vengeance. You might have received the former yesterday. Today you get the latter." Frost raised his sidearm, aiming it squarely at Doraf's head, his hand perfectly steady. "Wait," Doraf said quickly. "You can't just execute a prisoner of war. There are laws." "Laws?" Frost's voice was sharp as a blade. "You dare speak of laws? After ordering your officers to falsify records? After planning to blame the school bombing on the humans themselves? After launching another attack that would have killed more civilians?" He stepped closer, his weapon unwavering, eyes like chips of blue ice. "Here's what's going to happen, General. You will be tried for war crimes. In a human court with human laws. Every moment of your deliberations after the bombing will be played for the tribunal. Every word you spoke when you ordered the cover-up." Dora felt his blood run cold. "You really were in our systems." "For weeks," Frost confirmed with clinical detachment. "We know everything. Your lies, your plans, your cowardice." The human lowered his weapon slightly. "I'm not going to kill you, General. That would be too easy. You're going to live with what you've done. You're going to face the families of those children. You're going to hear their names, see their faces every day for the rest of your life." Frost stepped aside, revealing more human soldiers entering the command post. "Take him," Frost ordered, his voice as emotionless as if ordering coffee. "And make sure he stays alive. He has a date with justice." As the human soldiers secured him, Dora finally understood the true nature of humanity's terrible reputation. It wasn't just their capacity for vengeance that made them the most feared species in the galaxy. It was their unwavering commitment to justice, their ability to distinguish between error and malice, between accident and intent. That was what made humans truly terrifying. And in that moment, General Doraf the Enlightened finally realized why humans had conquered the stars, while older, more powerful species had fallen before them. Because in the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their warships or their technology. It was their unflinching, merciless dedication to justice. 3 days later, Doraf sat in a cell aboard the human command base. The accommodations were not cruel, but the isolation gave him too much time to think, too much time to replay his mistakes, his misjudgments, his fatal errors. The doors slid open, revealing Major Frost. The human entered alone, unarmed, showing no fear of his prisoner despite Doraf's physical strength advantage. The temperature in the cell seemed to drop several degrees with his arrival, earning his nickname yet again. "General," Frost said, taking a seat across from him with meticulous precision. "You've been formally charged with violations of the Interspecies Compact on Warfare, specifically the deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure following an accidental strike." "It wasn't deliberate," Doraf protested weakly. "The school was an accident." "Yes, we know," Frost agreed, his voice like winter frost on glass. "As I told you on the battlefield, we intercepted your abort command. We have the targeting data showing the guidance malfunction. The school was an accident." "Then why am I here?" Doraf asked. "Because of what came after," Frost said, his blue eyes void of warmth. "Your orders to cover it up, your decision to press the attack, knowing full well it would put more civilians at risk, your willingness to falsify records and lie about what happened." Frost leaned forward with calculated deliberation. "Do you know why we were able to defeat your assault so decisively?" Doraf shook his head. "Because we've been watching you for weeks. Your communications, your planning sessions, everything." He spoke with the cold precision of a surgeon. "We were gathering intelligence for a counteroffensive, and then we heard you in your command tent, ordering your officers to lie about killing children." The human's eyes were hard as Arctic ice. "We could have forgiven the accident, General. Mistakes happen in war. But we will never forgive what came after." Doraf lowered his head. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of extinction," Doraf said simply. "We all know the stories. The Red Reef campaign. What humans do when they're young or threatened." Frost was silent for a long moment, his stillness that of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Do you know what those mercenaries did that was different from what happened at that school? They deliberately targeted multiple schools. They celebrated it, Frost said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could flash freeze nitrogen. They broadcast footage of dying children, a psychological warfare. They laughed, Dorff recoiled visibly. There's a difference, General, between a tragic accident and a deliberate atrocity. Between a mistake and malice. We understand that difference. We respect it. Then why? Because you chose to lie, Frost interrupted with surgical precision. You chose to sacrifice honor for advantage. You chose to risk more civilian lives rather than accept responsibility for those already lost. Frost stood up, every movement economical and controlled. Your trial begins tomorrow. It will be broadcast across both our territories. The evidence is overwhelming. The sentence, when it comes, will be severe. And my troops? Dorff asked quietly. Those who surrendered immediately will be repatriated to Kagor space. Those who followed your orders to continue fighting? Frost's smile was colder than vacuum. They made their choice. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, General. The school you hit, we've already begun rebuilding it, and above the entrance there will be a plaque. It will read, "Let their memory teach us that honor is not what we claim in victory, but what we preserve in defeat." As the door closed behind Frost with a precise final click, Dorff shivered, not from the temperature but from the realization that in all his years of studying humans, he had misunderstood one fundamental truth about them. It wasn't just their capacity for vengeance that made them the most feared species in the galaxy. It wasn't their technology, their numbers, or even their tenacity in battle. It was their absolute, unwavering commitment to justice, their ability to distinguish between honest error and deliberate deception, their willingness to forgive the former, and their relentless, cold, calculating pursuit of those who committed the latter. That was what made humans truly terrifying, and as General Dorff the Enlightened sat alone in his cell, awaiting judgment from the species he had so fatally misjudged, he finally understood why humans had conquered the stars, while older, more powerful species had fallen before them. Because in the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their warships or their soldiers, it was their unflinching, merciless dedication to justice. And against that there was no defense. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.